Shortly, all New Zealanders are about to celebrate Matariki, Maori New Year. Like many Kiwis, I had never heard of the event previously, relied entirely on what I had read on the internet to explain what it was all about. So we are all on the same page. Let's read some brief descriptions on Matariki. These are all in the first cluster of Google searches, by the way. Reading those, I had high hopes for the day. I'm not against a uniquely New Zealand day to celebrate and acknowledge our shared history at all. My interpretation was it involved the resurrection of an indigenous pagan festival. An excellent example of one of those comes from Scotland, where the Beltane Day Fire Festival came back into life in about 1988. Swaves of body-painted chicks with their boobs out, a winner in my books. Peru. This photo on your screen is one I took in Lima, the second largest cemetery in the world, the Virgin of Lourdes. What they do in that country to pay tribute to their dead relatives is to go to the graveside and drink the person's favourite tipple. There was even a bottle store inside the cemetery, and the day I was there was people having picnics on top of the granddad's tomb. In my mind, we had our own versions of those two celebrations tied in together. Way cool. It got my tick of approval, and I began working out with weights, so I would feel more comfortable dancing half naked around the fire come the end of June. Pity the bits about traditional feasts, bonfires, gatherings surrounding Matariki, honouring the dead, that sort of thing, aren't actually true. Observation of stars, preparing of crops are, just not the anthropological bits, say who had a barbie in 1722 and whether the neighbours got an invite. Was it BYO? Did 17th century Maoris have sing-alongs including 10 guitars? Kids went to fly a kite? Didn't happen. This, my friends, is another stark lesson on the difference between what you see on the internet versus what is in dusty old books. The ones no one can be asked opening in 2022, except sad people like me. Before I prove this conclusively, what a disappointing flop Matariki was back when, particularly if you liked a good hangi, I want to take a step back a sec. If I'm right about where I sit on the spectrum of what people think about when it comes to a public holiday in New Zealand, I believe I fit into the biggest block. Queen What's-Her-Name's birthday. What's Boxing Day about again? Who cares? It's a day off. Maori separatists in Aotearoa don't go to work on Queen's birthday out of spite, as a form of protest for what happened in the reign of the current monarch's great-great-grandmother. Kyle Chapman and his white power cronies happily put their Doc Martens up on Waitangi Day. Atheists get to argue with their relatives on Christmas Day, the same as Bishop Brian Tamaki. Holidays in New Zealand are an alarmingly easy sell, particularly if you associate that day with a few beers with your mates over burnt sausages. Hey presto, half the country has Irish heritage, likes Guinness, if but for a day. The most sacred day for me personally, the one with the deepest meaning, will always be Anzac Day. Let me now take you on my recent journey to the swish new Christchurch Library in Cathedral Square. Take a deeper look into the written record of the customary aspects of Matariki. Originally I had hoped to be doing a video on an Indigenous Day of the Dead. That particular search started with Te Araroa from the Bay of Plenty. 573 pages in that book from 1967 and nothing in the index at all about Matariki. The traditional history of the Waikato Tainui, a chunky publication as well, and clocking in at 416 pages. No mention there either. To be clear, by no mention here, I mean the word wasn't mentioned or listed in the index. Even after just 2 books, I knew I was running into problems. Let's get down into the South Island. What do Ngāi Tahu have to say about the traditional annual celebration? In a book that records the foundation of the iwi, couldn't find a listing there either. Perhaps they had a different name for it. Come on, Ngā Pūriri. What importance was New Year to you guys? Not a lot, if the lack of listing at the back is right. 4 books in, and I honestly wondered if I had misspelled the word and googled it up to be 100% sure. Hey, perhaps the word had changed. At that point I decided to make a side trip into the section of the library where the contents are precious enough to be sealed off from grubby hands. You have to sign in and wear gloves. Back to my old faithful, the Colenso Maori to English Dictionary from 1908. By the way, I did try and see if they had an earlier Williams Dictionary, only that book in question was somehow missing. Here's what the Colenso Dictionary had to say about this important date on the calendar. You'll probably by now see there's a gap where it should be. Undeterred, I pressed back on with my search on the shelves. Maori life in Old Taranaki. Let's be honest here, folks. Looking at that title, if you wanted to learn about the role Matariki played in Maori life before European settlement, surely this had to be it. The author won an OBE for this single work. Nah, no listing. You can't say I'm being selective here either. It's a fairly good cross-section if I do say so myself. Next were 2 books about the tūhoi. Number 1 had Zip. Number 2, I Struck Gold. 3 pages from a massive 1200 page early 1906, or was it 1916 work? Anyway, it was a tūhoi, the Children of the Mist. Only that was confined entirely to the origins in terms of the star cluster and the legends that surrounded it. Not a sausage about ceremonies, fires lit, feasts scoffed. The score by now was 1-7. Even then I'm being generous. Technically it was 0.5-7. In terms of a profile, old Matariki was taking a battering. Still, there was time to rescue some pride and not to bring into total repute much of what was on the internet. Within the pages of Strike 1. Rescue us, award-winning Maori author, please. Strike 2. Strike 3. I was out. My research was over. 27 authors and contributors was what I would suggest a fair suck of the sav. I also had other projects to attend to. As I moved on, the first kicker that sprung to mind was, let's imagine now you were searching Matariki using materials published before, say, 1970. There was no internet. Where would you get? You would be hard-pressed to find anything whatsoever. It wasn't even in the primary Maori dictionary in 1908, almost like it never existed. It took me ages to come up with the 3 pages I did. To be straight, Matariki was indeed a thing. In terms of astrological observations and legends surrounding them, a time to plant crops. If it was the most important day of the Maori calendar in which people got together and did what we would all call celebrate, like we were told is the case all over the net, from what my research shows, it was a bit of a fizzer, a perennial Guy Fawkes on a rainy day. If at this point you've got your knickers in a twist, already given it an unlike, think my appraisal sucks and what your uncle said happened is much more of a reliable source, want to shoot the messenger, realise by default you were saying 26 authors of those books sucked as well, because it is they that omitted Matariki altogether from their respective iwi opuses, not me. From my perspective, the lack of coverage of the Day of the Dead aspects was particularly disappointing. By then, I was already bench pressing a massive 10 kilograms. I was hoping it would lead to enough material to do a separate video, only I would probably be in a grave myself were books to be the only source. I know this video will not go down well with a lot of people, the ones that feel they are more in tune with the modern day narrative, which is totally your prerogative. I'm not going to pour scorn on people doing what they see best on their day off, June the 24th. If you want to pay respects to a dead loved one, have a spit roast with a pig and the whānau around, more power to you. Just don't get sucked in to thinking that's what went on 2 centuries ago. Detractors of this video will also suggest I'm against the day simply because it's of Maori origins. Besides already answering that one earlier on, none of what you and I think changes squat in terms of the lack of written evidence, scribed in many cases by Maori authors. It's either there or it's not. Honestly, regardless of what turned up on the shelves, I would prefer Matariki to say Queen's birthday. Sorry peoples, wanting to vent spleens, get me to look at a blog site. Comments are officially off. I'm already off doing new projects from the same trip. As the intro of the video indicated, this is a great case study into not believing whatever pops up on the net. Go enjoy this new annual day off as best suit you. Haere rā. Bye for now.